Hi guys, it's Steve for CollectorMania here doing another deck tech in our 32 series. This one is focused on Golgari, the last of the guild pairs, finally. It's been a while. It's been, what, 15 videos now, so we're having a great time with this, especially this series has been a blast. But anyway, back to the topic, Nath of the Gilt-Leaf. This is our Golgari deck. This is probably one of my favorite Golgari commanders of all time. I kind of picked him up on a whim one time when I was at CollectorMania, just looking through their foil box. Thank God now they have a foil binder. We've upgraded a little bit here. But picked him up, didn't know what I was going to do with him, just kind of put him in a box. And then one day I just decided suddenly to build the deck and built it really mean with Sadistic Hypnotist and Waste Not and stuff like that. Everybody hated it. Now I'm not allowed to play with those cards anymore. So we've kind of taken a little bit more casual spin on it, and now it's tribal elves. So anyway, let's start with Nath here. Nath is a 5-cost legendary elf warrior. He costs 3 colorless, 1 black, 1 green. He states at the beginning of your upkeep you may have target opponent discard a card at random, which is an awesome ability. Just a quick reminder here, what I like to do is I like to put a dice on top of my deck just to remind myself that I have that trigger, because once you draw, you've missed it, so keep that in mind. And then it says, whenever an opponent discards a card, you may create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. So, awesome, it's going to generate you an army to fight with. With that, we're actually going to start with the Lords. We're mixing this up a little bit because those guys are super important in this deck. So, we'll start here with Jorga Warcaller. This card is ridiculous in this deck. It's basically, it has multi-kicker, so you pay more mana into it to make your creatures a little bit stronger, because for each multi-kicker you pay, Jorga gets a gets a +1/+1 counter placed on him, and for each +1/+1 counter placed on him, all of your creatures get that much stronger. So, ridiculous effect, and as you'll see throughout the deck, there's a lot of ways to kind of like capitalize on that. And then our next Lord here is Elvish Archdruid. This guy, as you may already know from like Modern Elves and all kinds of stuff like that, is a powerhouse. You tap him down and you make green mana equal to the amount of elves that you have. That is ridiculous. So usually you can just pop out 1,000,000 elves with this guy, and it's insane. Next we've got one of our pseudo win con cards. It gives all your elves +1/+1 in Forest Walk, and that's Elvish Champion. This card has won me a fair amount of games. You kind of have to look for the opponent that is playing green, but usually it's pretty easy to find. So, awesome card to include in something like this. With that, we've got Azuri Renegade Leader, one of the typical elf ball commanders that you'll usually see, and I just had to include him in here because he's ridiculous. He is an overrun on a creature, plus he has a little bit of a regeneration shield, so awesome card once again. And then we've got Immaculate Magistrate. This card, really, I mean, think about the combo between it and Jorga Warcaller. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, all of a sudden, you've got 10 elves on the board. Jorga already has 2 counters on it. You tap the elf, give him 10 more counters. So all your elves are now getting +12/+12. Like, oh, that's just devastating. And then with our last Lord, we've got Dwayne and Gilt-Leaf Dane. This card is crazy. It was actually the commander of the deck a long time ago, back when I just had mono green elves, just because it's a little bit different. It gains you some life when you attack, and then it also has reach, which is something that's usually missed in these types of decks. You know, usually you're very vulnerable to flyers, so it's a nice include in the deck. So with that, that's our Lords. Probably the meat of the deck, I'd say. And then we'll go on to our mana ramp / fix. This is pretty generic for elves. I mean, we've got Arbor elves, elves of Deep Shadow, Llanowar elves, those ones that you normally see. There are a few highlights here, though, like Deathrite Shaman. We all know this card is ridiculous, and I will read it off for the ones that don't know about it. So it is a hybrid cost card. That's the way you'd say that, right, Eric?
Yeah, hybrid.
Yeah. So a black or a green. It's a 1/2 Elf Shaman, and it's got 3 modes on it. So tap, exile target land from a graveyard, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, which is the main reason I have it in here, to be honest. Like, a lot of people are playing fetch lands now, and it really can get you out of a bind if you're just missing your black or green or whatever. And then we've got pay 1 black and then tap, exile target instant or sorcery card from a graveyard. Each opponent loses 2 life. Just insane. This can actually finish your opponents off. And then you've got green and tap, exile target creature card from a graveyard, you gain 2 life. So not only is the card providing you a way to finish off your opponents, but it's also providing you a little bit of graveyard hate for those crazy, Golgari decks that you usually are playing against, the opposite side, or any reanimation strategies. So just a ridiculously awesome card, and I can't really talk enough about it, to be honest. So we'll move on, just to make this not a 20-minute video about Deathrite Shaman. Okay, next up we've got Heritage Druid. This card used to be kind of hard to get a hold of, but now that they've started reprinting it in a lot of like secondary product, I think a few Commander products. The big one with the elves, what was it called?
The one with tight Freylease.
Yeah, that one. The one with Freylease, I think it's in there. But anyway, amazing card. You tap three elves to get 3 green mana with cool ability. Then we've got another highlight here with Priest of Titania. This is a lot like Elvish Archdruid, just a really good way to make a giant mana-producing monster, really. And then on from that, we've got Moldiah Channelers. This card is kind of interesting. It's not a card that I've seen played in a lot of elf builds, but I think it's kind of cool because it can be a really good creature that you can beat somebody down with, or it can also be a mana dork. So it's got a little bit of flexibility that way. And then when you start talking about like adding in like things like Sylvan Library or Sensitive Divining Top, you can kind of manipulate what it is, which is even cooler. And then probably my favorite flip Planeswalker, Nissa Vastwood Seer. This card is pretty amazing. It grabs you a forest, and then once you have 7 lands, it flips over to its Planeswalker side, which is actually really good. I don't believe we have an image for that. So I'll kind of tell you what the Planeswalker does. We kind of flubbed there, but that's okay. So on her flip side, she's got a +1, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield, otherwise put it into your hand. Pretty awesome ability. -2 is put a legendary 4/4 green elemental creature token named Ashaya the Awoken onto the battlefield. So that's pretty cool, a little bit of defense. And then we've got a -7, untap up to 6 target lands. They become 6/6 elemental creatures. They're still lands, so pretty interesting. Starting loyalty of 3, so not bad. But like I said, in this deck, usually I just use it for the +1, a little bit of card advantage. Okay, on from that, we've got Rishgar. Well, a new card from Kaladesh. This is a really awesome card, actually. It puts +1/+1 counters on 2 of your creatures, and once again with the Immaculate Magistrate, it kind of synergizes with that. So you can turn pretty much your entire board into a mana dork if you want to. That way you can just get some crazy amount of mana there. And then we've got Sylvala, Heart of the Wilds. Ooh, this card. I'll tell you, my wife built a Sylvala, Heart of the Wilds Commander deck, and it beats the crap out of all of us. I've never seen her be so tenacious with a deck, but when she plays this deck, she just tears us all apart with giant 20/20 trampling monsters from hell. But anyway, in this deck, it's kind of underutilized in a lot of ways, but it's still a great way to make a ton of mana. You're not really going to draw a whole lot of cards off of it like you usually would, which is unfortunate because you're not necessarily playing the biggest creatures. You're just playing creatures that get big, if that makes any sense. So there's that, and then we've got another card in Harvest Season. Of course, this card is amazing. There's not really... I think I've already talked about it before in a video, but it is probably one of my favorite new cards, so there's that. Okay, now we've got card advantage. So there's your typical elves that come into play and draw you a card, like Elvish Visionary, Mass Admirers. They're kind of meh, but they're in here, because they're elves and they're a body. But we've got things like Fauna Shaman. This is basically a birthing, well, not really a birthing pod. It's a birthing pod effect. You'll go through and find a card, you'll dish a card from your hand and then find a card that you're looking for, a creature card. Usually, actually, I find Dwynen with this just for that little bit of protection against like the flying drakes and all kinds of stuff like that. But really, you can find whatever you want. Along that same line, you've got things like Birthing Pod, which is definitely another highlight in here. Birthing Pod, it's not very much of a toolboxy deck, but it definitely can be if you need it to be. Once again, going back to Dwynen, or really any of these guys, if you just need to find a lord to kind of finish up the game, this is definitely a way to find it. And then again, with some more card advantage we've got for Phyrexian Arena, just a good way to draw cards. And then a really important one, in my opinion, is Guess Grimoire. It's, in this deck, makes a huge impact with Nath being your commander. You're going to get a automatic upkeep draw there, so it's like having a Staff of Din without having to pay for one, which is kind of nice. But with some of the spells that you'll see, it actually just turns into a drawing machine, like, for example, Siphon Mind. This spell is instrumental in this deck. Especially when you're playing against full table, 4 players, it really, really works well. Each of your opponents end up discarding a card, and then you draw a card for each discarded card. So if you think about comboing that with the Guest Grimoire, you've got 6 draws right there. So that's pretty good. Okay, on from that, we've got Recursion. We've got our typical suspects in here, like with Victimize, Seasons Pass, Golgari Charm with the Regeneration Shield. But then we've got Patriarch's Bidding. I know this card has been brought up quite a bit because of the new Commander decks that are coming out here pretty soon, so I would snatch up all your copies of this card as you can. Basically what it is it's a living death almost. Well, it's not, I wouldn't call it a living death. It's a way to recur all creatures from your graveyard of one type and just put them straight onto the battlefield, which in a deck like this can be pretty crazy. But, think about that in like Tribal Dragons or Tribal Vampires or Tribal anything. It's just a crazy card to pick up. I think it's about $12 now, so it's probably going to climb up quite a bit once that Commander stuff gets released once again. And then another fun card is Makeshift Mannequin. It's an interesting card that I'd never actually played with. It's instant speed, which is fun, and I don't know, I just don't see it very much, which is kind of surprising. So anyway, there's that. And then we'll move straight on to our removal here. First one that I kind of highlighted here is Viridian Zealot. It's just a naturalized on a guy. You basically just play him and then sacrifice him, and you can destroy either one of those. I kind of like those effects that sit on the board, and then you can just kind of decide when they go off. There's a downside of if somebody board wipes and you don't have a target, it's just kind of wasted, but in the same token, like, you can just kind of sit on it. So, and it's not a spell that you're casting, so you can't counter it, unless you have a Stifle or something like that, of course. Okay, and then Reclamation Sage. This is kind of an ETB version of that. Really just good removal. And then we've got Gilt-Leaf Winnower. Put this mainly in here for flavor, but it also, it works sometimes. It destroys something that has a different power and toughness. So like a 3/4, it can hit. But if it's like a 4/4, you're out of luck. So keep that in mind. It'll kill a Seedborn Muse, though, so that's important. Then we've got Attrition, just a good sack outlet, plus a good way to just nuke things off the board. Really cool card. And then one of the cards that I feel kind of devious for playing is Smokestack. It's awesome. I've played it in quite a few decks, in the past. Kind of laid off of it a little bit because my opponents hate me when I do play it, but I think in this deck it just makes a lot of sense. So if you think about it, at your upkeep, you're getting a new elf each turn, and your opponents are going to have to sacrifice something each turn. So you just keep adding up those Smokestack counters until they have nothing, and you're just sitting there with a bunch of elves. So what does it matter? Another new card that I put in here is Capital Punishment. This card is actually pretty cool. It's one of the vote cards, so each of your opponents have an opportunity to either vote for death or taxes. With death, they basically have to sacrifice a creature. With taxes, they have to discard a card. So that's pretty good when you have Nath on the board, because really they have the option of either giving you another elf or sacrificing one of the creatures. So sometimes that can be really important. Like, for example, if you have your Coat of Arms out, they really don't want to give you more creatures at that point. Okay, and with that, we'll move on to value here. There's some really cool cards on here like Taunting Elf, Tawdry Preserver, just some protection stuff, but the stuff that I really wanted to talk about was like Risk the Exiled. This card's just a really good way to gain back all the life that you end up paying, like with Phyrexian Arena or Sylvan Library. It's just, life gain sometimes can be really valuable. Plus, I believe it comes with a little bit of regeneration, stuff like that for itself. But it's just a cool little card. It could actually be used as a green-black Elves Commander if you wanted it to be as well. And then we've got a really cool utility card in Nature's Herald. I did that last time too. I can never say that straight. But anyway, this card is awesome. It gives all your green creatures flash. I believe there's only one non-green creature in the entire deck, so pretty much your entire team can just come in at any second. So that could be really cool at like the end of turn. You just throw in a ginormous Jorga, and your opponents are just like, oh no, kind of thing. So, and then we've got Prowess of the Fair. Pretty interesting card. I've never actually tried it out, so I'm interested to see how it goes, but I think it definitely fits the bill here. And then another real highlight here is Throne of the God Pharaoh. I think this card is going to be amazing in here. I can't wait to have a chance to play with it in there. This I think I added it yesterday. Just think about it. You swing at somebody with like 15 of your elves. If they all survive, each of your opponents is going to take 15 at the end of the turn. So those 1/1s all of a sudden really, really matter. And then we've got Coat of Arms, which I would be a fool not to run in this deck because the amount of elves that it generates. One thing I will say is that I may have to end up taking this out because all these tribal decks coming around, it may become a problem. I don't want to give the dragon player a lot of points of value there with my Coat of Arms. So yeah, there's that. And then we've got a value land here in Wirewood Lodge. Just a great way to untap like your Archdruid or really any of those Selvala, any of those guys that make a ton of mana. So I just picked it up recently. I got a foil version of it, which I'm super excited about, and just a cool card. Last little section here is lands. I know I don't usually talk about dual lands, but in this one I felt like I should highlight the Gilt-Leaf Palace. I mean, it's got Nath's whole thing on there, so it's a really cool cycle of lands that basically comes out untapped if you reveal the card that it references on it, which is tribal usually. So like I need to reveal an elf to have this come in untapped, which obviously I'm playing a ton of them, so it usually works out for me. So with that, that is my Nath of the Gilt-Leaf deck tech. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and as always, like, comment, and subscribe, and check us out next time. Thanks, guys.